In 1944, 14-year-old George Stinney Jr. was executed based on an unlawful conviction in Accaloo, South Carolina. To this day, he remains the youngest person to be executed in the country. So as you can imagine, the 1940s was a dangerous time for Black people in Clarendon County, but that still didn't stop them from standing up to injustice.
He was a man of integrity and a man of great faith, and a man who just wanted things done right.
In 1947, Levi Pearson, a farmer and father of three, became the catalyst behind the fight for equal education nationwide. He was frustrated that in Somerton, the segregated Clarendon County School District provided 30 buses for white students and none for Black kids who were forced to walk to school in hot and freezing temperatures.
White students would pass us on their bus, throwing things out of the bus window at us, using the N-word and all of that.
For Black students, the treacherous trek to and from school meant walking miles and miles and even more miles in some of the most rural parts of Clarendon County, just like this.
Well, my grandfather wanted to make a change. Along with my Uncle Hammond, they talked about it and they decided to file the Levi Pearson versus Clarendon County School Board in 1948.
With the assistance of local civil rights leader Reverend J.A. Delane and attorney Harold Boulware from Sumter, Pearson, on behalf of his son, sued the district for a school bus. The case was dismissed because the school board claimed that Pearson did not pay taxes in the district, but it was only a tactic used to throw the case out, as Pearson did own property within district lines.
He suffered greatly. My grandmother often talked about how he was denied machinery to harvest his crops. She talked about times when shots were fired in their homes and how they pushed my aunts and uncles under the bed for their safety and how they took turns sleeping at night. And this really breaks my heart. Several nights he slept in the woods because if by chance the night riders called, they could tell him that he's not here. And so he slept in the woods several nights.
And for context, what are night riders?
KKKs.
NAACP lawyer Thurgood Marshall, Reverend Delane, Levi Pearson, who was now tucked away in the background to keep him safe, along with other civil rights leaders, met with families across the county who were fed up with the imbalance in education. They were done demanding equal transportation. They now wanted equal education as a whole. I was reading some history that said sometimes classes may have had 60 to 70 students in it at a time.
No, absolutely. Whatever number of kids were in that class, they were in one classroom. All of the toilets were outside. There were no indoor bathrooms. And every school book that we had was a hand-me-down from the white students.
On November 11, 1949, more than 100 Black parents and their children signed what they called an Equal Everything petition, demanding equal access to bare necessities like textbooks and facilities. Petitioners often met at the historic Liberty Hill AME Church in Somerton, which is where I sat down with Beatrice Brown Rivers. Mrs. Rivers was 13 years old when she signed that petition. Today, she's 88. Take me back to that day, Ms. Rivers.
If he signed his families, the parents signed first and the children signed under the parents' signatures. Harry Briggs's family was the first family to sign. My family was the second family to sign.
Because the Briggs family was the first to sign, the lawsuit became known as Briggs versus R.W. Elliott, who was the head of the school board. In 1950, the petition was filed in federal court in Charleston.
They knew it would be hard. They knew they would suffer consequences, but they knew they had to do it.
In the late 1970s, in a WIS interview on awareness, Harry Briggs talked about the consequences he faced for signing the petition.
You lost your job. What did the guy say to you?
He told me to take my name off the petition, or else he'd let me go.
And
so I said, well, I gotta go.
So your commitment to this, your belief in this was so strong that you were willing to lose your job.
So I lose it.
Harry Briggs' name was not to be employed nowhere. So when they fired him, he got a job working, painting, staining floors under a pseudonym name because he couldn't work under Harry Briggs.
All the petitioners lost their jobs and initially lost their fight in court. In July of 1950, Thurgood Marshall argued that separate but equal was illegal. Judge J. Wace Waring, an ally, dismissed the petition, encouraging Marshall and his team to file a new one demanding desegregation of schools instead. A new petition was signed, and in May of 1952, Briggs versus Elliott headed to the U.S. Supreme Court, becoming one of 5 cases from Kansas, Delaware, Virginia, and D.C., fighting for desegregation in schools nationwide. Collectively, the cases were known as Brown versus Board of Education.
Each case had its own set of lawyers. Thurgood argued Briggs' case before the Supreme Court.
One of the people he brought in to show evidence that the children of Clarendon County and Somerton were being brainwashed by racism was the doll test. They would ask the children various questions. Which doll do you like the best? Which doll looks like you? The results of the question was overwhelming. About 60% of the children liked the white dolls better.
And we're looking at the original dolls.
We're looking at 2 of the original dolls.
Inside the courtroom, a push to end segregation. Outside the courtroom was an effort to keep it.
Governor Jamie Burns of South Carolina didn't want South Carolina to be on top in this desegregation matter. He introduced the 3-cent sales tax. That was the first time we had a sales tax. And the funds were earmarked to build new black schools and improve those that needed improvement. All of that to head off desegregation.
After years of stonewalling, appeals, and dismissals, on May 17, 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled segregation and separate but equal in schools was unconstitutional. What was your response?
Well, we were all very happy that the Supreme Court found, for us. But the next question was, what do we do now? What's going to happen? They were all happy about that, but that was the next question. Where do we go from here?
The ruling never said how integration would be enforced. That decision wouldn't come down until a year later in 1955. In the meantime, white community members built private schools to prevent integration.
There's Clarendon Hall in Somerton. That's, black kids go there now, but it was built for that reason, not to integrate, so to have a school for their white kids.
Petitioners also continued to face backlash. Due to being blackballed economically, most were forced to leave the state just to make a living. Harry Briggs moved to Miami, Florida.
Did you tell people in Miami, well, I was...
No. Even at home here, I don't mention it. No, I'll let you talk about it.
Reverend Delane's home in Clarendon County was burned down. He moved to Florence County, where his life was constantly threatened. In 1955, he was indicted for assault with a deadly weapon after defending himself against Klansmen who fired shots into his home.
He went back in his house and got this very rifle and fired back after them. As a result of him firing and actually hitting that car, they swore out a warrant for his arrest, and he had to leave the state of South Carolina. He was never able to return.
South Carolina's slow response made it the last state in the nation to desegregate public schools. In fact, it wouldn't be until 1965, more than 10 years after the Supreme Court's ruling, that the first group of black students in Somerton walked inside of this building, integrating the town's all-white high school. Do you remember the first day that you walked into Somerton High School?
Yes.
What was that day like?
You know, you were taken to your class, and our black leaders, you know, stayed around for a while and made sure we were okay. The students would part the hall for you. They didn't want to touch you. And I always thought that was a privilege.
Today in Somerton, Scotts Branch Middle and High School is thriving under leaders who once were not allowed to walk the halls. Tributes and monuments now stand in Clarendon County, honoring the pioneers in education. And in 2023, Their families and those who were eyewitnesses to history petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court to rename the landmark Brown versus Board of Education decision to Briggs versus Elliott, an effort spearheaded by civil rights photographer Cecil Williams, who captured a number of significant moments during the trial in the 1950s.
Many of the people involved with the Clarendon County Briggs versus Elliott petition did not have even a 10th grade education. So I felt that if I can bring something to light that was, again, where they're wrong by history, this is what I tried to do.
You see, the ride through life can take you on a winding journey. And when you come to a bump in the road, hold tight, because when those doors open and you reach your destination, you are bound to step into greatness.
When they decided to sign that petition and try to force some changes, they were standing up for all kids all over America.